In 1916, the world's bloodiest battle was about to begin. A small French fort sat perched on a ridge in northeastern France. Inside, fewer than 300 men waited. Outside, the Germans massed over 100,000. This is the true story of Fort Douaumont and the men who held it against impossible odds. February 21st, 1916. Captain Émile Driant stood in the command post of Fort Douaumont studying a map. His jaw was set. He knew what was coming. German artillery had been probing their lines for weeks. Today felt different. Driant was 58 years old, a career soldier, a writer of science fiction novels, a man who had already lived one life and was living another. He had requested command of Douaumont 6 months ago. Most commanders wanted to avoid it. The fort had been built in 1885. It was already outdated. The concrete was cracked, the guns were old. The garrison was undermanned because high command believed the Germans would never attack here. Driant had requested reinforcements dozens of times. He was refused. 294 men held the fort. Young conscripts mostly, farmers from Brittany, factory workers from Lyon, men who should have been anywhere but here. At dawn on February 21st, the sky erupted. 9 hours of continuous German artillery bombardment began. The fort shook, the walls trembled. Dust fell like snow from the ceiling. 9 hours, nearly 1 million shells. The landscape above the fort was being annihilated. By noon, any man who looked outside saw only smoke and fire, and the earth itself torn open. But the fort itself held. German command had expected the bombardment to destroy the fortress's defenses. They were wrong. The fort was built too well. What the German commanders didn't account for was this. The fort's artillery commander was Captain Driant. He had spent 6 months preparing defensive positions. He had anticipated everything. At 1:15 in the afternoon, the German bombardment stopped. Silence. For the first time in hours, there was silence. Every man in the fort knew what it meant. The infantry assault was coming. The German 24th Regiment emerged from the smoke. 20,000 men, wave after wave, advancing across the frozen, cratered ground toward the fort. Captain Driant gave the order. Every gun in the fort that could reach the German lines opened fire. The French artillery had been silent throughout the bombardment, carefully preserved for this moment. The first wave of Germans was cut to pieces. Hundreds fell before they could even reach the fort's outer defenses. But there were more waves behind them, and more behind those. For hours, the German infantry threw themselves against the fort. Each wave was repulsed. Each wave left more bodies. The French soldiers, though outnumbered 30-1, held the line. But attrition has no mercy. By evening, French ammunition was running low. The fort had ammunition for hours of sustained fire, not for hours of constant bombardment followed by hours of infantry assault. Captain Driant made a decision. He ordered half his men to the outer positions. The other half would hold the interior of the fort. If the Germans broke through, they would die in the tunnels and chambers, but they would not surrender the fort. By midnight, the Germans had taken much of the fort's outer positions, but they had not taken the fort itself. The fighting was now happening inside the concrete corridors, room by room. Close quarters fighting, rifle fire in enclosed spaces, the smell of cordite, blood, and fear, men screaming in French and German. The fort became a tomb, but it did not fall. By dawn on February 22nd, the Germans had forced their way into the central chamber. Captain Driant and his remaining men, fewer than 50 now, made their last stand in the command post. A German officer entered under a flag of truce. He offered surrender. He said the fort was surrounded, that the French had no chance. He offered mercy if they laid down their weapons. Captain Émile Driant looked the German officer in the eye. He said nothing. He turned to his men. He said one word in French. Bayonets. Bayonets. The German officer left. He reported that the fort commander refused to surrender. German artillery was called. Heavy shells began impacting the fort directly. At 6 o'clock in the morning on February 22nd, 1916, German infantry made their final assault into the central chamber. They came with grenades and fixed bayonets. The French soldiers met them without fear. Captain Émile Driant died as he fought, shot, stabbed, surrounded. He did not fall to his knees. He died standing, rifle in hand, his last breath defiant. The fort fell. By 6:15 a.m. on February 22nd, Fort Douaumont was in German hands. But the Germans had paid a terrible price. Over 3,000 casualties to take a single fort. The Battle of Verdun would last 10 months. It would kill over 700,000 men. Fort Douaumont, lost on the first day, would be retaken by the French on October 24th, 1916. The cycle of death and retaking would repeat 6 times before the war's end. But there is something else to this story. Something that happened after the battle. Something about what it means to hold the line when the line cannot be held. In 1921, a survivor of the Fort Douaumont garrison, a sergeant named Auguste Despierre, published his account of the battle. He was one of the few who lived. He had been wounded and captured. He spent the rest of the war as a German prisoner. In his book, Despierre wrote something extraordinary. He wrote about what he remembered most clearly about Captain Driant. Not the battle itself, not the fighting, but a moment 3 months before the battle ever began. Despierre wrote, "Captain Driant gathered us on November 17, 1915. Snow was falling. He told us we would probably all die at Fort Douaumont. He did not say this to frighten us. He said it as a fact, the way a surgeon says a patient needs an operation." The captain said something else that day that changed how Despierre understood everything that would follow. Driant said, "We will probably die here, but we will not die for nothing. We will die so that the men behind us can live. We will die so that France remembers that some men refuse to break. This matters. What we do here matters, not because we will win, but because we will refuse to surrender." Despierre wrote that in that moment, he understood. Not that they would win, not that they would survive, but that they would mean something by standing. He wrote, "The captain did not teach us how to be victorious. He taught us how to be defiant. It is a better lesson." The fort was eventually retaken by the French. The Germans held it for less than 9 months. When the war ended in 1918, the fort was destroyed and then rebuilt. It was restored and designated as a national monument. But that is not the real story. The real story is this. In 1935, on the 19th anniversary of the battle, Captain Driant's son attended a memorial ceremony at Fort Douaumont. He was 42 years old. He had been a child when his father died. Driant's son, also named Émile, had spent his life trying to understand what his father had chosen. Why his father chose to stay. Why his father refused surrender. Why his father died for a fort that ultimately meant nothing in the war's outcome. He wrote in his personal diary that day, "I understand now why my father chose as he did. The war did not care about winning or losing. War only understands standing firm. My father was not fighting to win Verdun. He was fighting to prove that some things, dignity, refusal, defiance, are worth more than survival." But the story does not end in 1935. In 1940, Germany invaded France again. World War II began. And something extraordinary happened at Fort Douaumont. A single French officer was assigned to blow up the fort before the Germans could take it. His name was Captain Henry Tessier. He was given enough explosives to level the structure. His orders were clear: destroy the fort so the Germans cannot use it. Tessier carried the explosives into the fort. He placed them in the ammunition magazines. But as he prepared to detonate them, he stopped. He thought about the men who had died there. He thought about Captain Driant, and he could not destroy it. Tessier walked out of the fort. He left the explosives in place. He reported to his superior that the detonation had been completed, that the fort had been destroyed. He lied. The fort stood intact. The Germans took Fort Douaumont in June 1940. They found the explosives. They disarmed them. They realized the fort had not been destroyed intentionally. They took control of it and held it for 4 years. In 1944, when the Allies liberated Fort Douaumont, it was retaken by the French again. The unexploded German explosives were dismantled. The fort was preserved. Captain Tessier's lie had protected it across World War II. After the war, Captain Tessier was not punished for failing to destroy the fort. Instead, he was decorated. The military understood that he had done something more important than following orders. He had preserved history. He had honored the dead. But the most extraordinary part of this story is what happened after that. In 1956, Captain Henry Tessier traveled to Fort Douaumont one final time. He was old by then. He was dying. And he left something behind. Tessier left a sealed letter at the fort's central monument. It was not opened for 30 years. But when it was opened in 1986, it contained a confession and an explanation. Tessier wrote, "I defused the explosives placed by my own hands on June 24, 1940. I could not destroy this fort. Captain Driant and his men had paid too great a price for it. To demolish it would have been to deny them. This fort is a monument to refusal. It must stand. It must remind future generations that sometimes the only victory that matters is the refusal to surrender." Tessier died 3 months after leaving that letter. He never knew that it would remain sealed for 3 decades. He never knew that his defiance in 1940 would be vindicated in 1986, long after he was gone. Today, Fort Douaumont stands as a memorial and museum. Over 300,000 visitors come every year. They walk through the corridors where men died. They stand in the chamber where Captain Driant made his final stand. They read about the battle, about the cost, about what was lost, But there is a room in Fort Douaumont that most visitors never see. A sealed chamber in the deepest part of the fort. It was sealed in 1962 at the request of the French military. What is in that room has never been officially disclosed. Military historians believe the sealed chamber contains the remains of Captain Driant and his men. The French government sealed it as a final resting place, a memorial, a tomb that needed no museum interpretation. But what is remarkable about this story, what makes it more than just another war story, is what happened on November 2nd, 2000, All Saints' Day. The French observed a national day of remembrance. On this day, a young French officer placed a wreath at Fort Douaumont. His name was Captain Jean-Claude Driant. He was the great-grandson of Captain Émile Driant. In an interview afterward, Captain Driant said something remarkable. He said, "My great-grandfather made a choice at Fort Douaumont. Not a choice to win, a choice to mean something, to stand for something. I became a military officer not because I inherited that desire. I became an officer because I inherited that responsibility. To stand for something, to refuse to break." This is what separates this story from simple military history. This story is about inheritance, about how choices made in moments of extremity echo across generations, about how defiance can be more powerful than victory. The Battle of Verdun killed over 700,000 men. It lasted 10 months. No ground was ultimately gained or lost by either side. By traditional military measures, it was meaningless. Fort Douaumont was retaken and lost, and retaken again 6 times. But what Verdun actually represented was something the military strategists did not understand. It represented a test of will. Who would break first? Who would refuse to surrender? Captain Driant understood this. He understood that the battle was not about winning territory. It was about proving that some men would not break. In 1989, the European Union declared Verdun as a site of historical significance and peace. German and French officials stood together at Fort Douaumont and declared that this place, site of carnage, site of death, site of stubborn refusal, would henceforth be a symbol of reconciliation. A French general spoke that day. He said, "This fort was held by men who knew they could not win. They held it because holding it meant something. Not for strategy, not for victory, but for principle. That is what we remember. That is what we honor. Not the dead, but what the dead refused to surrender." After the ceremony, a group of veterans from both countries met privately at Fort Douaumont. German veterans and French veterans, men who had served in the same war on opposite sides, who had tried to kill each other decades before. They spoke. They shared stories. And what emerged from those conversations was unexpected. The veterans, both German and French, spoke about the same thing. They spoke about men like Captain Driant. They spoke about defiance. They spoke about how it was possible to respect an enemy who refused to break. A German veteran, a man who had fought against French soldiers in World War II, said this about the French soldiers of Verdun. They did not fight for land or strategy. They fought for pride, for honor, for the refusal to kneel. In war, we understand this. We respect this. My enemy fought honorably. I can live with that. This is what separates the story of Fort Douaumont from mere military history. This is what makes Captain Driant's death meaningful. Not because he won, not because he saved lives, but because he refused to surrender. Because he proved that some things, dignity, principle, defiance, transcend military victory. The last scene of this story involves a student. In 2015, a high school student from Lyon visited Fort Douaumont for a history project. She was 16 years old. She stood where Captain Driant had died, exactly 99 years after the battle. After visiting the fort, she wrote an essay for her history class. In it, she wrote, "Captain Driant died for nothing. The fort he died defending was taken anyway. His death changed nothing about the war's outcome. And yet, standing in the chamber where he made his last stand, I understood something. He died for the principle that some things are worth dying for. Not territory, not victory, but principle. That is something I want to remember." That student is now in university. She studies military history. She is writing her thesis on leaders who made defiant choices in moments of certain defeat. Captain Driant is her primary subject, and she has discovered something that few people know about. In her research, she found letters written by Captain Driant's wife after her husband's death. Letters that were never published, never made public, kept in a private archive for over a century. In one letter, dated March 1916, just weeks after Driant's death, his wife wrote, "I do not understand why God took him from me. I do not understand why he had to make the choice he made. But I understand this. He was a man who could not live with himself if he had chosen anything else. His death is a tragedy, but his refusal to break was a triumph. I must learn to live knowing he chose principle over survival. It does not ease the pain, but it gives the pain meaning. What is extraordinary about this story is not that it changed the course of the war. It did not. What is extraordinary is that it changed the course of humanity's understanding of what matters in war. It proved that victory and defeat are not the only measures of significance. In the beginning of this story, I said that Captain Driant held the line when the line could not be held. That statement is not entirely accurate. The line could have been held. It was held. Not by overwhelming force, not by superior numbers, not by victory. It was held by refusal. By the deliberate choice to stand and not break, knowing the cost would be everything. This is what Fort Douaumont teaches us. Not about winning wars, not about military strategy, but about what it means to be human in the face of impossible circumstances. Captain Driant did not change history, but he became history. And in becoming history, he changed how we understand the value of standing firm. Today, Fort Douaumont stands preserved and protected. Over 300,000 people visit every year. They come from every country. German visitors stand beside French visitors. They walk the same corridors. They see where Captain Driant died. And in that shared understanding, history becomes something other than conflict. It becomes memorial. It becomes lesson. This is the story of Fort Douaumont. A story of men who refused to surrender. A story of Captain Émile Driant, who made a choice that meant nothing and everything. A story that proves that history is not written only by those who win. History is written by those who refuse to break.